else, I'ma be myself. So they gon' have to watch me treat myself. You make it look good. Watch yourself, huh? Yeah, you make it look good. Don't let it watch yourself, huh? Cause you make it look good. You make it look good. Watch yourself, huh?
Well, it turns out demand factors like the COVID stimulus and higher savings only account for about 30% of inflation, while rising corporate profit margins are to blame for 40%. The pandemic was a crisis, so our government created stimulus packages to do what a government is supposed to do: keep people fed and housed and stave off a depression. And by the way, it worked.
Unemployment's low, the job market's hot, and that's going to be bad for working people.
Were any of you alive in the last crisis in 2008? We gave trillions of dollars of stimulus to banks and Wall Street recovered quickly. But no one else did in 2008. This is the graph of the recovery from the pandemic. We plunged, we got stimulus, and the economy recovered. Here's the graph from 2008. Only one is being called America's worst economic policy in 40 years. For the last half century, our economic policy has just been a flow chart where no matter what the input is, the answer is the worker must pay the price.
Welcome to WYCD Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. How are you doing? Folks, it's Friday. Well done. Looks like we made it. Almost. Now we're there. All right. Mercy me. Well, hopefully, we have a solid internet connection remaining. Lord knows I'm scrambling to get this breakdown fixed by Monday. Because that's when your old pal is making a guest appearance on the Letter Hack. And I will ignore that fact for the time being. Anti-corporatist, you know I'm a dreamer, but my heart's of gold. Good lad, good lad. Pinkerbell enjoying the wave haven. Yes, indeed. That's from Audio. A service that allows you to download a la carte licenses to music, which is why you will hear the same 10 or 15 songs for a good long while. So I'm glad you enjoy it. We have a couple of things I would very much like to talk about. I'm hoping, very much hoping, that we can get to the audience sharing portion of the program. But first, Majority Report was kind enough to clip out the thing I very much wanted to talk about today, which is how we're going to get a middle class again in the United States, and how, frankly, this pattern can be followed just about anywhere. And I know it's gonna involve a specific U.S. government organization, but there is an equivalent in many a country around the world. So I think it's worth looking at for everybody, but also for some reason the United States has determined to not go down alone. So let's at least celebrate that. Let's jump right into it. We are talking about the National Labor Relations Board, as well as union efforts. Specifically, one of the leaders of the United Auto Workers Union. Boy howdy, if you are looking for routes to fixing things, rounds about these parts, that don't involve begging a politician to do the things they'd say they do. Labor. is your strongest weapon. We live in a time where there's two ways countries go to war. Well, three if you count espionage, but really two ways that they outright go into conflict, let's say. Number one is by throwing projectiles at each other in the old-fashioned way, and the other is economics. You could do away with a country, a whole country, if you could get its population to not go to their jobs for about 2 weeks. That's the society we live in. So understand that if you're a worker in that country, by the modern standards, you have a degree of power. Recognizing that and leveraging that is a way outside of politics that you can get things done. Let's get to specifics. Here is, coming up quick, the majority report from a little bit earlier. Playing a clip from a union president talking about the existence of billionaires at all, as well as what some of their demands are for continuing to work, continuing to make the products that make their boss wealthy. Yeah, crazy idea, but they're expressing demands in order for that boss to keep living their wealthy lifestyle. Let's listen in on the commentary with Sam Cedar. I am curious, because this is Friday Peace Talks. I'm curious to hear what you all have to say about it. All right, well, no fancy transition then.
Numbers came out. Unemployment rate pops up a little bit, rose to 3.8%. Payrolls increased by about 187,000. That's good, not particularly great. That's about the amount that it takes to keep up with new people entering the job force. So the Fed's attempts to at least soften the labor market seem to have worked okay. Job openings fell. It's still well above where they were prior to COVID, prior to the pandemic, but it's at its lowest levels in terms of job openings since March of 2021. So we'll see where this heads. But there will be another sort of cliff. You know, we had that Medicaid cliff, which ended up sending a lot of people off the Medicaid rolls that actually.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who is experimenting with jump cuts again. That's only 5 minutes. Let's.
We're still eligible. Now we're having the child care funding cliff that's going to happen in about 30 days, where federal funding that has been subsidizing child care for the past 2 or 3 years, 2 years, I guess, is going to end. And so people are going to be having to pay more for child care to the extent that they can.
Hey, gang. I know this is Friday Peace Talks, but let's just take a moment. If I don't, how about this? If I don't remember to talk about this on Tuesday, in the very first stream, let me know the child care cliff that we are running towards, because that is something that we can affect, and we should, at the very least. We can make the people that literally will vote to have starving children. We can make them be blatant about it, and we have an obligation to make them say awkwardly that the people that would choose to have children go hungry, they must say it loudly and in front of the whole nation. They need to be upfront about who they are.
And as a society, it just passes as if it's as if this was just a function of nature, as opposed to the lesson that we should have learned from COVID, which is that these policies work. Meanwhile, we'll be talking also with Digby about what happened with the National Labor Relations Board. And I don't know how much of this is a function of that, but I think we're going to progressively see unions get more aggressive because they're going to have more ability to organize. Every bit of small administrative change, and this one that we saw with the Cemex case this week was by no means small, but every little change empowers unions more, and then it's good to see them flexing it. Here is UAW President Shawn Fain. This was released today to UAW members. Remember, we are now 14 days out, 13 days out
13,
from a potential strike. And the UAW did also file with the National Labor Relations Board saying that at least some bargaining units, GM and the Jeep maker Stellantis, of not bargaining in good faith. That's 2 weeks before these labor contracts are set to expire. This is an attempt to get the union membership ready for a strike. Here is Shawn Fain.
You know, I heard this saying once that every billionaire is a policy failure. Truer words have never been spoken. Billionaires, in my opinion, don't have a right to exist. The very existence of billionaires shows us that we have an economy that is working for the benefit of the few and not the many. I say the same's true for poverty wages and long hours. We need to wipe them out. Boom. The labor movement once fought for a vision of work life in which everyone had 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for recreation. Sadly, it feels like we've gone so far backwards that we have to fight just to have the 40-hour work week back.
Look, I'm going to let the man cook because he's earned it. I just want us to fully appreciate, when's the last time you saw somebody that looks like that, talking like that? Folks, things are getting serious. Guy's got an emblem stamped onto his shirt. He's a company man of some company. I realize that's the union logo. Point is, it's organized. What's he saying? It sounds like something I would have heard Brother Bernie saying on the live stream that was on just before this. Billionaires should not exist. Not because of any taste in how much money somebody should have, but because they don't have the ability to earn that much. It's a sign that if you are a billionaire and not, say, just a mere wretch, a mere gross, petty 100 millionaire. If you're a billionaire, it's because you've been stealing from your workers. You've been stealing their money, most obviously, because you haven't been compensating them properly. But there's no telling. There's no telling if they would have taken the value that you, the billionaire, stole from your workers. Because they might have instead of taking all that value, they might have chosen, that's what you chose to do if you're a billionaire. So yes, billionaires should not exist. And goddamn right, Shawn Fain. Preach it, brother. Said I was going to let him cook. Let's watch him cook.
Why is that? So another asshole can make enough money to shoot himself to the moon?
Boom.
Good point. Good point. the UAW is looking for a 46% pay increase for workers over the life of the contract and a 32-hour work week. But this broader point of billionaires being a policy failure, not only is it necessarily mean that there is essentially less money for a greater number of people because it's being hoarded by a small group of people, but it also, the same can be said for political power. And the danger that it represents to have billionaires, we've talked about in the past, just in the context of the Gates Foundation and their destructive work on education in this country over the past 20 years. But it's good to see these union folks ramping up, and certainly there is no doubt that while this National Labor Relations Board thing is going to help unions organize and expand, if they take the opportunity, the point is it's emboldening unions, I think, and that's a good thing.
Okay, 2 immediate thoughts. Number 1, let's be petty. We're approaching Saturday. That's the time we set aside for it, and I can only hold back so much. That is a way too young picture of Sam Cedar. I'm sorry. It might have only been from a couple of years ago, but brother, it's been a hard couple of years for all of us. And let's also say he's a hell of a lot more handsome as a silver fox. Enjoy it, but take a new picture for God's sake. Look, that is about the most heartening news I could have heard, if not for the larger news. The National Labor Relations Board, in a recent lawsuit, has decided, and I'm going to do a hell of a lot of summing up here because we're not going to watch a whole nother piece on it. I'll just sum it up, and we'll talk about it in more detail if you want later. Has decided that companies which interfere with the process of having a vote as to whether or not your place of business will have a union, that foul is no longer going to be a couple of shots at the free throw line, or what it used to be, the NLRB just sets a date for when the vote will be. No. The penalty, if somebody has found, or if a company has been found to interfere with a union vote, is that the union just exists. In other words, it's like when Mike Tyson took that second chunk out of Evander Holyfield. Through I love Mike Tyson dearly, by the way. Sue me. But nonetheless, that night, paid $99 to watch that fight. That used to be a fortune. Anyway, that night, Mike Tyson couldn't win. And he admitted it by cheating. And that is what a employer does when they interfere illegally with their employees' attempts to organize a union, a union vote. So between those 2 pieces of news, the National Labor Relations Board just saying enough of this nonsense. We're not going to play this game. We're reverting back to like 1950s law. Or rather, the 1950s policy, and a frickin' auto worker, or the United Auto Worker Union's president, was that who it was? Sean Fain, saying that billionaires flat out shouldn't exist, putting on the bargaining table a 32-hour work week for auto workers. A 32-hour work week. there are strong signs that being a working person in the United States is actually going to be worth something again. And that has ripple effects not only for union folks, not only for residents of the United States, that has ripple effects worldwide. For the same reason the protests in France had an effect here. Other people see what's possible, just like we saw what was possible. Je suis a Frenchman when it comes to protesting. Hell yes. Folks, it's nothing but good news, and I'm excited to see what you have to say about it. Tamara Chance, ask not what your country can do for you. Elon doesn't do a damn thing for San Francisco. True. The anti-corporatist. Billionaires shouldn't exist. Kinda a shame I've never become one, cause, well, I'd like to think that I'd have gotten rid of the rest of them by now. Man effing Elon, I could have fixed the world for a lot. Yeah, I like to think that if anybody in this community became a billionaire, that a whole lot of other folks would suddenly be millionaires. That's just the sense I get. And also some tremendously expensive pranks would be played. If your old pal Jake becomes a billionaire, you can fully expect for let's just say Denzel Washington to come sprinting up to you randomly and to hit you in the face with a pie, like a standard. Let's say a banana cream pie. That's perfect. And then hit you with the seltzer, and then he's just going to keep on running, and he's going to shout over his shoulder, "No one will ever believe you. I'm Denzel Washington from The Preacher's Wife." And that'll be how I spent about a cool $1 million. And you'll know your pal's a millionaire. And your friends and family will truly never believe you. And that's my plan. Mars Falcon, good to see you. Tao and Jack, hello. Ooh. I just saw that. Tinkerbell, the new union leadership is really kicking ass. I love it. Cry about that, Jim Cramer, says Tinkerbell. Hell yes. And also, Tinkerbell, I see that quote from earlier. It's too long to read, but it was groovy. Song lyrics, and I loved it. The anti-corporatist. Okay, so I'm a little bit suspicious, talking about the earlier, the intro, and thinking that they are not as worried about labor militancy as automation is about to hit the up curve. True. And automation is a serious concern here, because as labor becomes more expensive, the oligarchs will just try to get rid of that expense. So once again, we find ourselves in the position of needing to ensure that we have the correct lawmakers in place in 2024. Let me tell you, there are backup plans upon backup plans. If it comes to that, we hit 2024 and we either don't have the Blue House, Senate, and White House, or we just don't have enough sway over the people in those offices because too many centrists got the positions we need. We are going to then have to use the remaining labor that we have to ensure that people who are retiring due to automation, and we must call it that instead of layoffs, it's early retirement, to make sure they're treated with dignity, and to make sure that the companies that will make hundreds of billions off automation have to distribute tens of billions to their workers over however many years, 50, whatever, for the early retirements. But yes, I think you're quite correct to look at that as the next obstacle. Oh, mercy me. trying to decide. I got you know what? It's Foxy's future ex-husband. We got to pay the man his respects here. And Foxy, I hope you'll let us know when the relationship turns sour, so I can have an honest whack at him. The man I'm talking about is, of course, Brian Tyler Cohen. May he never actually discover this channel and all. The jokes I have about Brian Tyler Cohen really rely on him never actually finding this channel and seeing them. But nonetheless, it's Brian Tyler Cohen. He's got a great lineup for talking about some of the most important things happening in our lives. I recommend the channel in all sincerity all the time. Let's have a look at his take on a matter we've dealt with in the past. And I should probably just do this as the intro, huh? There it is. Well, a lot of y'all in the Wicked community put in time, effort, and money into getting Janet Protasiewicz elected in Wisconsin. She's the newest member of the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And the very reason that election was so important was because we knew there would be a case coming in front of the Wisconsin Supreme Court soon. In fact, it's coming up real soon now. That frankly determined whether or not democracy was allowed in Wisconsin, or whether people had to just do whatever Republicans said at any given time, simply because it was a Republican saying to do it. Basically, the whole nation watched that race, and so Wisconsinites were well aware of the stakes when they voted for her. Can you imagine? Can you imagine what Republicans are trying to do now after Janet Protasiewicz won fair and square over her election-denying rival? Let's have a look with our pal, Brian Tyler Cohen.
Watch. So, Mark, Wisconsin Republicans are now floating the idea of impeaching the newest justice on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, that's Judge Janet Protasiewicz, if she doesn't recuse herself from an impending redistricting case that's currently working its way through the Wisconsin court system. Can they do that?
Boy, the moral bankruptcy of the Republican Party knows no end. I mean, here we are, a new justice of the Supreme Court has been put before the voters, has stood election, which, by the way, lots of people like me don't think we ought to be electing our judges, but that's how lots of states do it, including Wisconsin. She put herself in front of the voters, and she hasn't even ruled in a case and they're already threatening her with impeachment.
Side note, how do you feel about that? I honestly don't know how I feel. Should you elect a judge, or should the judge be appointed? Who decides who gets to say what laws are fair, what laws were broken? Honest to God, I don't know what the right answer is there. My instinct is to say that a judge should not also be a politician, but I have to also admit, if the judge is not selected by the people, who selects the judge? Well, a politician. Who selects the politician? Well, the people. Let me know what you think. I would like to do some soul searching and consider your responses as I form my own political opinion here.
And so, look, impeachment is an inherently political process, right? It goes through the state legislature. So can they do it? I think they can. If you look at the state constitution, they think they can. I'd be curious to know how they're going to meet the standard of her being corrupt or having committed crimes and misdemeanors. I mean,
I need to clarify what he said. He said they think they can. No, they don't. Not in the sense he means. What he just said is they think. I mean, if you take what he said literally, then what he was saying was they think that the laws allow them to do that. Not quite. They think that they will be allowed to do it. And that's the difference. They don't actually care what the law says. They certainly don't care what the law is intended to be. In other words, the intent of the law. They don't give a damn about that. As we have talked about from truly the beginning of this channel, I think the 4th maybe video done on this channel, they care only about if there will be consequences for their acting up. Now, what he's about to lay out is how weak their case is, and their case won't hold up to scrutiny. But will they be punished for trying to make it? Should they be? I think yes. I think this is so blatantly defying the will of the people that punishment is warranted. But perhaps that's a conversation for another time. Let's get the lowdown on Janet Protasiewicz's possible impeachment should she vote on the very thing she was elected to vote on.
I mean, she hasn't done anything other than been elected and taken the bench.
Well, I guess the question then becomes, is there legal recourse if they are going to abuse this inherently political process of impeachment?
So this is kind of like the chicken and egg, right? This is like the irony of all this, which is that presumably if she were to challenge this in state court, it would then weave its way up to the state Supreme Court. So the state Supreme Court would then be the arbiter of whether or not the legislature can do this or not. And, we don't know. This is all really uncharted territory, because it has not been historically the case that legislatures use the impeachment power to simply decide that they don't like the outcome of an election. I mean, I know it's other part of the country, but the Republicans in the House of Representatives are kind of like, well, we should impeach Joe Biden, and it's like, well, for what? And they're like, well, we don't really know, but we just want to.
I mean, it was just put so perfectly, I had to say it. Who said that? Shade Dragon. Where is that? Shade Dragon. Oh. I've missed it. Ah, yes. Wah! Nobody can have rights and vote but us. Conservatives, unironically. Yeah, I mean, that's it exactly. That's it exactly.
We just want to impeach him. And it feels like that's what's going on with this Supreme Court situation in Wisconsin.
Well, on the issue of recusal, if a judge simply discusses the issues that will come before the court while that judge is on the campaign trail in a state that elects judges, does that preclude that judge from being able to rule on those cases?
No. Again, this is the reason why there are people, myself included, who don't think we ought to elect judges, right? Because when you elect judges, the judges need to campaign. Well, they need to campaign about something, right? They need to express what their judicial philosophy is, how they approach issues, what they think, of the issues of the day. And I don't think that there's anyone who thinks that Justice Protasiewicz has violated that standard. If she had violated that standard, you'd be seeing the state bar or a judicial ethics body weighing in, but that's not what's going on here, right? She hasn't transgressed any rule. It's just that what she expressed views on are extreme partisan gerrymandering. And of course, who's the beneficiary of extreme partisan gerrymandering? The Republicans in the legislature. So it's quite corrupt on their part.
Yeah. Isn't there already a ruling from Wisconsin from 2011 that found that judges can't force one another off of cases? And would that be able to have any impact in this situation here?
Yeah. So what's interesting about that case is that involved a very conservative justice who, to make the story shorter, had essentially ruled on a case that was very, very similar, almost identical to a case that was then coming before the court. And there is a rule of ethics that you cannot rule on a case that you had decided as a lower court judge.
Fun fact. We are entering the era that proves why fascism doesn't really last. I mean, the absolute longest lasting fascists are like 30 years for the dictator, you know, or for the authoritarian ruler, about 30 years. But those are the Babe Ruths of dictators. Really, you got these flash in the pan moments. Why is that? Well, they don't have an internal logic. They say whatever to achieve a short-term goal. And all kinds of political philosophies end up bucking up against them. Including people that are genuinely just trying to help others, to try to make the world a better place, including people that are not at all trying to do that, but they're just so fiercely independent they don't like to be told what to do. All of those philosophies end up bucking up against them, but the one, if all of those fail, the one that takes a fascist down eventually is fascism itself. It eats itself up. They just set a rule. They set a precedent, and it was to force through whatever awful thing this judge wanted to do, whatever corrupt, unethical thing. Yeah. Well, now they've got to live by that rule. And if we had truly fully gone over, or if we have truly fully gone over to fascism in Wisconsin, and it isn't dying yet, then Janet Protasiewicz will be gagged, so to speak, and this rule they previously set will be ignored, and it will be infuriating, but understand this will happen again and again in all parts of the country with increasing frequency, because they've had enough time now to set precedent and have it bite them in the butt. They said things work a certain way, and the reason they are cheating constantly is because they cannot win under any consistent set of rules. That's why they must keep changing the rules, because they're bad people who don't have your or anybody else's except their own interests in mind. They can't win, so they will lose. Now it begins.
That actually is a rule of ethics. And so there was an effort in that instance by the liberal justices to say, hey, Justice, you shouldn't rule on this case. And it was the conservatives on the court who said, no. The only person who determines the ethics and the recusal of a justice is the justice himself or herself. By the way, sounds awfully familiar to what we hear conservatives saying about Clarence Thomas and the conservatives on the U.S. Supreme Court. So there is a lot of hypocrisy going on here among the Republicans in Wisconsin.
All right. Well, in Wisconsin, justices can be impeached by a simple majority in the state assembly, and they can be removed.
Look, this is important, this part Brian Tyler Beauty is going into, but that was for you, John. But I just want to give you a moment to process what you've heard, because it might be a shock. Let's play it again.
Clarence Thomas and the conservatives on the U.S. Supreme Court. So there is a lot of hypocrisy going on here among the Republicans in Wisconsin.
Republicans sometimes are hypocrites. Yeah, dripping with sarcasm. Obviously, they are the most ridiculous excuse for a political organization we have ever allowed to exist in the United States. Their continued existence past 1990 will baffle future generations, and I am not even prepared to explain it now.
Crimes are engaged in corruption. Republicans do have those margins in the
Why they are
legislature.
allowed
So
to be.
would a lawsuit now be able to prevent them from doing this before it actually happened?
So I don't know that there would be a reason to bring a lawsuit before they started the process. Whether the justice would bring a lawsuit at all, I don't know. But I think the point at which she would bring the lawsuit is probably as that first part of the process, the impeachment process. People think of impeachment as the second part, but you are correct in the way you put it. Impeachment is what the legislature does, the assembly does, and then removal is what the Senate does. I think that she would probably, or someone would probably bring that lawsuit during the impeachment process. But right now there's nothing, they haven't done anything. They haven't actually started an impeachment proceeding.
Now, if she was impeached, or if the process for an impeachment took off, would she be able to continue serving as a judge on the top court while those proceedings played out?
So the rule in Wisconsin is that once she is impeached by the House, she cannot rule further until the Senate process is complete.
What I want to hear him say is that there is a rule which will be implemented that will force the Senate to hear the other side of the impeachment immediately. But for that matter, I think the feds might need to get involved to stop this. You simply you cannot be allowed to get away with this. Imagine two scenarios for a moment. Scenario one, somebody says, I've got this here kitchen knife. Let me just upload it to Facebook, and I'm going to drive north and stab your old pal Jake to death. Somebody says they're going to do that. They announce it, and then they start driving, and they're checking in at gas stations. Oh, filling her up. Gonna go stab Jake. Presumably, if the police were made aware of that, they could intervene before my untimely demise. At the very least, post somebody up at my front door to say, no knives here, please. Presumably, you don't have to wait, in other words, for the harm to happen if you know it's going to happen and you know it is against the law. Contrary to the laws, let's say. Now, these Republicans are claiming that they have some legal right to do this. They're saying that we have this ability here, this impeachment. That's a legal right of ours. And so for that reason, you would be interfering with us doing our business if you were to stop it before the harm was done. And only after we have prevented Janet Protasiewicz from weighing in on this crucial decision, only then, when it no longer matters, can we decide whether or not we were right to stop her from doing this. We were right to interfere with the people's choice. I don't buy that. I do not buy that. And so I'm presuming he's going to say this can be fast-tracked. That's me being an optimist, but I don't even think that is good enough. Here's example number 2. Somebody says, I'm a mailman. I work for the government. And I have put a stamp on this kitchen knife, and I'm going to go deliver it to your old pal Jake's chest about 35 times. Police officers at the front door. Mailman says, I am doing my job as an employee of the government. So step aside, officer. I'm going to go deliver this package 30 to 40 times into this man's chest. What's wrong? Why not? It's a government position. He's the mailman saying he's doing it in the name of his job. So clearly, you must first let the thing happen, and then later, after I've bled to death. Come on, I can't afford a hospital. After I've bled to death, then we can decide whether or not that was really within the bounds of the mailman's job. I'm exaggerating, obviously, to show the flaw in the reasoning here. And if this is what the laws really, truly say can happen, then we have an obligation to change those laws, because we've discovered a loophole that needs to be closed. I'll give Republicans this. They are filthy degenerates, the politicians. They are filthy degenerates, one and all. But they are good at finding the flaws in our system, because they are constantly trying to bring it down.
By the way, to the process that we see in Texas with Paxton, who was impeached by the state house there and is awaiting trial in the state Senate. But again, I think there's real constitutional problems with that approach when it comes to a justice, right? It's one thing if you're doing that with an AG in Texas because there's someone else in his office who can step up and be the new AG, or someone can take that role. But with justices, you're then actually undoing the will of the electorate, and the person hasn't been convicted. So again, I think that there is, I won't say a certainty or even a likelihood, but there's a real strong possibility of a lawsuit, and I think it would come at that impeachment process.
Wouldn't that also open the door for Republicans to kind of take a more nefarious route by allowing her to have been impeached in the House and allowing it then to languish while any conviction vote actually carried itself out? And so, if they're not going to get a resolution one way or the other, she's still not able to serve as a judge while that impeachment is working its way to the actual conviction vote.
Yeah, so look, I think that we are in an unprecedented time in our country's history where Republicans are willing to corrupt every process of democracy to fulfill a political objective.
So, and I'm going to leave, I'm not going to be that cruel. I'm going to stop him right there, though. Because this sounds, I haven't watched the clip yet, I'm watching it with y'all, it just seemed interesting. Did watch the one earlier, but this one, fresh. Sounds like he's about to say, this is unprecedented. Can't believe they're doing this. We don't have rules set up for this because nobody imagined that somebody in the U.S. government, that a Republican would be corrupt. Nobody except people with functioning eyes, partially functioning brain, basic observational skills, something along the lines of a dog with glaucoma, simple sensory skills. Those people could tell that Republicans were corrupt. So here's the answer. Every time Republicans see a vagary in the law, they know to snap to one way of thinking. And this way of thinking, the fact that they all know to default to this, means that they act in a united front automatically, and it's extraordinarily effective for making the American people, who tend to go with the flow, it makes them think it's normal, it's right, it's the way things ought to be, or at the very least it's defensible. At the very least there's an ideology behind it, surely. What do they default to? They default to whatever works for Republicans. What would be most convenient in the moment for Republicans? That's what they all snap to. Whatever interpretation of the law means that Republican politicians, never their voters, just politicians, get whatever they wanted. It might coincidentally be what Republican voters wanted, but that's incidental to their decision-making process. That's a happy side effect. No, they default to whatever's good for them when there's a vagary in the law. So how do we combat that? I'll tell you, because I suspect this guy's going to disappoint us, and I don't want you to get bummed out. We default ourselves, and we don't default in a corrupt way like the Republican politicians do. We default to whatever is logical. The intent of the law. Does this seem like it's the way this was intended to go? In Wisconsin, you can vote for your judge, but if one party doesn't like them, they can just stop them from participating in the job they were voted in to do, based on literally nothing. Hasn't done anything yet. She has done nothing except campaign. That's all she did. And it's a job that requires campaigning in order to get it. It is a literal requirement of the job she has. So, for the sin of winning an election, Republicans are effing with the way the government works yet again. So how do we default? We default to saying they are not allowed to do that. Whatever forces we need to muster are fine. Federal? Do we need to get the FBI knocking on doors saying, hey, what you're doing right now, this is starting to smell like treason? Or just straight up another coup? That is a type of coup, for the record. There's a whole database of the kinds of ways a government can be illegally taken over. This is one of them. Now, the kindest thing we can do for them is not allow them to do that crime. I don't even think it would be a kindness to then let them get away with the attempt to do the crime if they actually try to impeach this judge. You're not doing them a kindness then. You're encouraging their allies to do the next crime. And what they need is a rolled up newspaper to whap them on the nose. There's no point in talking to them. They simply need consequences. So those consequences need to be scary, and they need to rhyme with Blail Cell.
Republicans in Wisconsin don't want fair districts. Republicans in Wisconsin don't want a woman to be able to make her own reproductive decisions. And they are willing to corrupt the power of the legislature to do that. And this is a lawless time for the Republican Party in America, and it is a very dangerous time for our democracy.
To that exact point, Wisconsin Republicans are also moving to remove the state's top election official, Megan Wolf, ahead of the 2024 election, likely due to decisions made about absentee ballots in the 2020 election. Can you talk about what happened in Wisconsin in 2020 and what Republicans are trying to do by virtue of removing the chief elections official?
Yeah, so this situation with Megan Wolf is Orwellian. I mean, the first thing you need to understand about election administration in Wisconsin is that there is a election commission that is 6 members, 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats, and you need 4 votes to do anything. So poor Megan Wolf is being, first and foremost, singled out, not for the things she did, but for the things that a bipartisan commission that she is the top staffer did. Right? She just was implementing the decisions of the commission that she works for. So that's number one. Number two, she is widely viewed. And by the way, you don't take my view of this. You can see the comments of Republican election officials in Wisconsin and Republican election officials around the country. She is widely viewed as a model for good, clean election administration in this country, in part because she does have to respond to a bipartisan commission that has to work together. And in terms of 2020, look, Wisconsin in 2020 was a free and fair election. There was some...
And so on and so forth. I mean, more of the same. And the prescription for that is the same. This is a peace talks. We're just talking about the peace. But remember that. Assume decency and insist upon it. How do we insist upon it? Number one, treat your representative like your therapist mixed with your punching bag. They get paid enough. They get a lovely guaranteed retirement package that makes sure that that the U.S. doesn't suffer the embarrassment of having one of their former representatives seen to be living like their citizens have to. That would be an embarrassment. So, because they get to live the rest of their lives in that cushy position, even once they're done with the job, they get to live the rest of their lives with a guarantee of safety that the rest of us don't have. Make them earn it. Harry their nerves. If you're in Ohio, make this Wisconsin issue something that your representatives are aware of and annoyed by. And if you live in Wisconsin, I would recommend writing just about everybody you can, Republican or Democrat, and making your feelings clear. Because the time for patience is over. It's over. And it doesn't mean we have a temper tantrum. It doesn't mean we start, throwing bricks through windows. No. It means we write angry email. It means we say, I functionally am one of your bosses, and my vote will be to fire you, sir or madam, if you do not do as I say in this matter. And I assure you, sir or madam, whether you do what I say now or don't, I'm going to get a bunch of friends together, and I'm going to tell them about it. And we'll all see you. At the very least, we'll see your name and the box next to it in 2024. Oh boy, I would very much like to read some of your comments here. Groove Dragon nailing it. All power to the people. Nationalize energy. Hell yes. Hell yes. Ooh. Let me jump up. Wireless mic with the newspaper bop. I love it. Mars Falcon. Need to educate the centrists. Make them define their ideologies. Yes. Pin in that, returning to it. Make them confront their positions. They can be swayed if they have a reasonable liberal mind. Critical mass demanding change then. Hell yes. I think that's exactly correct. Let me tell you, no matter who you're talking to, make them define their ideologies. When you hear somebody call somebody else a socialist, pause them and say, hold on a moment. I think I know what a socialist is, but I'm not sure that I know what you think a socialist is. And let me make sure, you know what? Go even further. Go even further. You got nothing to prove. Say, I don't know what a socialist is. Can you define for me what is a socialist? Oh, that person's a communist? They have a communist agenda. Okay. Can you please explain to me what is a communist? Just broad strokes. What is a communist? Ditto for every ideology. But I think Mars Falcon has zeroed in here when it comes to talking to centrists on a great pattern. Just ask people to explain how much they know about this or that when they say this or that is what we ought to do. With the content you guys are even recommending. Pinkerbell, Foxy Dragon, Mars Falcon, Wireless Mike, Domenico, John Bailey, all of you, Groove Dragon, Shade Dragon. With the the content alone that I've seen y'all recommend or comment about, you have more political knowledge than 99 point I don't know what % of the voters out there. And there's an extreme amount of power in holding back a little bit. You know the answers. At the very least, you have a better idea of what the answers are, usually, than the people you're talking to, especially if it's somebody on the far right who's certain they know what the answers are. They don't even know enough to be nervous. You'll know. And when you ask them to define it, you'll be in an incredible position to then look it up with them, because we live in the age where that's entirely doable. And then with the correct definition of whatever they were saying, ask them questions like, if you thought Joe Biden was a socialist, which I hear all the time, if you thought Joe Biden was a socialist, and by this definition and by his, entire voting history, he clearly is not. What else are you sure of that might not be so? I would love to keep hanging out with y'all tonight, but I'm still working with a somewhat tedious internet connection, and the more I use it, the less I will be able to use on Monday. Speaking of, we are taking Salty Saturday off this week. Your old pal Jake, number one, isn't feeling too salty about nothing. Ben, despite being an incredibly sad week, it's also been a week of victories. But also, I'm using, for the time being, something with a limited amount of data, and I chew through it every moment I give a long-winded explanation like this. Oh, God. It has been a delight hanging out with y'all. Thank you very much for joining me on this Friday Peace Talks. I will see y'all Monday on the Letter Hack. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. And I look forward to it. And then, of course, Tuesday is a 2 for Tuesday. I can't wait. I hope to see you there. Try to upload some videos over the weekend as well. This has been WYCD Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. My name's Jake. Oh my God, but nationalize energy. Did I not say that? Yeah, Groove Dragon commenting, nationalize energy. Yes, 100%. That, by the way, that's the kind of stuff we're doing in 2026 if we win in 2024. Okay, peace.